Hello, hello, everyone, and happy Black History Month. My name is Max Boykin. I'm the movement director for the Black South Rising. I am super excited to start what is about to be an absolutely wonderful conversation around the state of the South, a reckoning, really here with Black South Rising and talking about what we're dealing with when we're talking about the threats to Black people in this time, but also how we are wonderfully working to push back against that and to build Black political power in this time. With that, I want to give a quick opportunity for our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and kick this conversation off. Then we'll go into a little bit of a background of who and how this collective of people came together and what we're trying to fight for. And then we're going to really go into the discussion and have some questions around what we're dealing with right now. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the State of the South tour itself. With that, I'm going to model also how I would love for our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, with myself giving a little bit of background on who they are, and kind of like how I was introduced to them as well. But with that, like I said, my name is Max Boykin. I use he, him, his pronouns. I come out of, I live 20 minutes right outside of Atlanta, and I grew up in this area. But my people are from Alabama, particularly Selma and Hopewell, Alabama, Lowndes County, to be exact, which is the birthplace of the Black Panther, not for self-defense, but the Black Panther Party trying to fight for for political power there in the deep lower parts of Alabama, and that's where my people come from, and we migrated over here to Atlanta, where me and my sisters were able to be a part of. I'm so happy to be a part of this, and a person of the South, and to have three other folks who are panelists who are from different parts of the South who represent the South in their own special and loving ways. And the first person I want to kick this off to is a person who. Actually, I met last in this group of people, but was one of a person who came with literally a the hair on their head was going to make sure that you were going to hear what they had to say. But then you heard what they had to say, it was even more powerful. And not just the advocacy that they did in Texas, but now that they do all across this country, for the rights of our people. Without a further ado, I want to introduce Michael Elizabeth. You can go ahead and introduce yourself. Just let people know who you are and where you come from.
I appreciate you, Max. I never had an introduction like that. That made me feel so warm and appreciated. So I love you for that. I'm Michael Elizabeth, they, she pronouns. I happen to be the Director of Public Health Policy and I happen to be the Director of Public Health Policy at Equality Foundation and the co-chair of the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus. And I'm so grateful to be here and anything for Black South Rising and for Black people in the South especially.
Thank you so very much, Michael Elizabeth. Next up, I met this person uh, years ago at a conference, and at the time, she wasn't the loudest individual, but you could tell she was always thinking. You also knew that she was continuing to bring that work into a different space, and to see her over the years continue to grow, continue to build, continue to move different conversations, and to be the change agent that she is now, it warms my soul. And every time I get to kick it with her, it's always a wonderful time. Without further ado, I will allow Kamaria Lafferty to introduce herself to y'all.
Thank you for that, Max. And yes, I am always thinking. There's always a look on my face. Hi, everyone. Kamari Laffer, she, her pronouns. Co-ED of the Sarah Project, steering committee member of the Caucus, member of PWN, based in Florida, Central Florida to be exact. And I was actually born in Arizona, just as a little nugget of something about me that people don't know. Back to you, Max.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, Kamaria. Um, Last but certainly not least, this person right here, she doesn't know, but I heard about her way before I actually met her. I was organizing in Chicago, or some would say the southern tip of Mississippi. I mean, the northern tip of Mississippi. Uh, folks, we're talking about this work that they were doing down in New Orleans and this chapter that was doing some wonderful work there and the work that they were going. And I'm like, who are all these folks in New Orleans doing this stuff? And they did stuff totally, and she knows this, they did stuff totally different than a lot of the other ones. And it was actually a beautiful thing. And then I remember like the first time I was actually able to come down there and sing with them and learn more of like what they actually do and break down and the fun, but also the work that they do in New Orleans. And now to see that she leads an organization that does work across this country and brings in that same fire and desire into that space every day. I want to introduce Miss Mandisa Moore O'Neill.
Hey y'all. I'm Mandisa. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm based in New Orleans. I'm from New Orleans, and I will be in New Orleans until the water has decided otherwise. I have the honor and pleasure of being the ED of CHOP, or the Center for HIV Law and Policy. I can talk more about that. I'm a Louisiana Black feminist, an abolitionist, and I'm so stoked to be in this conversation with all y'all. And happy Black History Month. And thank you, Carter G. Woodson.
Yes. Shout out to that. Folks who don't know, Carter G. Woodson was one of the first people over 100 years ago when we were before there was a Black History Month to start a Black History Week and to make sure that we had space for that and to make sure that we continue to live up to that. I was able to listen to a little bit of what Angela Davis was able to say last night and the importance of always being able to have that space. And even as this country tries to take away what is already ours and something that we have made sure is here, Black History Month is here to stay. We are here to also, one, celebrate our Black history, celebrate our Black future, and think about how we continue to also build power for our people in this time. When I talk about this State of the South tour, this comes out of Black South Rising, and I want to give folks some background and understanding of what Black South Rising is and how this space came together. Many years ago, during the first Trump administration, there was a time where Black leaders in the South, and I want to name some of them: Leisha McKinley Beach, Charles Stevens, Vanita Ray, who is still on the steering committee and leads Black South Rising now. We're looking around and seeing what we were seeing across the country, but also seeing what was going on in the South, and was noticing that the people that were speaking about the South, that were talking about the South, did not look like us. We're not the folks who were actually most impacted. It was many times folks who didn't look like them actually speaking or didn't look like us speaking for us and our issues and what was going on in our communities. And that led to a lot of the big problems that we were also dealing with. What we knew was there were certain demands that we had to have. I also want to uplift some of the demands that were lifted from HIV Racial Justice Now, which many of us who created Black South Rising back during the first Trump administration came out of. And there was key things that we said, let us remember, because there are those forces that are trying to invest in us in forgetting, but that Black lives do matter, that no human being is illegal, that healthcare, including comprehensive sexual and reproductive care, is a human right, regardless of country of origin. When Black South Rising came together, there were certain things that we were just knew from our very foundational document. We must speak for ourselves. We must invest in Black leadership. We must celebrate the commonalities of Black folks, but we also must honor the diversity among Black people in this, not just in this country, but also across the world. And understand that it's like we also understand Black people. Many of us had to come here through the Southern United States through the slave trade. That is a part of it. But there is also Black people that come from our communities outside of that came descendants of slaves in the United States. And they are still impacted by things that go on in the world, and also how in which policies come out of the United States. And also, lastly, that came out of that foundational statement was fund us, buy us, right? You need us to do this, but also fund us to do this work. Stop, underselling a lot of the work that Black people were doing, especially in that time. Since then, we have seen some shifts, right? We've seen, I know some of the people that are on this call are part of the Black United Leadership Initiative that came out of different conversations that were happening. We also know that what also came out of this, and one of the things is when we started this, Southern AIDS Coalition did not have an executive director that was Black. And I want to shout out our Danielle Houston got accepted as the new executive director of Southern AIDS Coalition. These are things that we have also seen shift over that time. But we've also seen the Trump administration come back into office. We've also seen during this time some of our state legislatures go even further conservative, try to push even more conservative laws that are further harming our folks. So many of us met last year, got re-engaged with Black South Rising a couple years ago, and we came up with a new vision and mission for it. Black South Rising exists to build political power, to improve health outcomes, and to promote healing for the Black South. Our vision is we celebrate a South where political power is held by and for Black Southerners, where our collective quality of life is evidenced by dignity, respect, and well-being. We had a new set of values. We thought about like and also how we wanted to do this work going into this year. One of the opportunities we also had was to be able to do a State of the South tour, which we'll be able to talk more about like different spaces that will be going. But some folks know that we'll be in Houston next week, Columbia, South Carolina later on this month, and along with some stops both in Atlanta, Georgia, and Florida before the end of the spring. These are important things for us to be able to talk to folks who have been engaged and had to deal with some of the struggles of right now, but also talking about how we build political power in the future and be able to come together. This is important for us as we also think about what is the future of the Black South with everything that is going on. We're dealing with an authoritarian regime that is intentionally attacks in the different cities and different communities that our folks live in. We understand that, and we also understand we're going to push back. Within that, we have a number of different documents and pieces. Thank you, Vanita, for dropping in many of the foundational pieces of the Black South Rising. We did have both a foundational document, but also a political agenda that came out. And some of the key pieces that we were trying to focus also on the political agenda was to make sure that we address some of the inequities that have continued to happen. Some of the things you'll hear us talk about sometimes is the social determinants of which broadly defined as the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, age, and people's access to power, money, and resources. But we also understand and have a deeper understanding of something called the political determinants of health, which we also understand that these things aren't just willy-nilly. There are people in power that make these decisions and try to keep certain people out of power. And going back all the way to slavery in the United States, that has been something that they have continued to do and continue to do in different ways. And even when we punch back, like with the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, then we also have to deal with counter punches like the Jim Crow laws, redlining, and other things that we saw to try to take away the power of our people. So it's important for us to understand our Black history. And before I get into this next piece, it's something that M. Adams said last night that definitely is sitting with me. It is important for all of us to be a historian, but it is also important for us to be historical actors in this space. So it's important for us to also take the actions taken to also make this happen. And I see that Vanita also put this, join BSR, follow us on Facebook, IG, and Blue Sky. And we're also going to be expanding and thinking through different ways that we're also seeing folks on social media. But with all that being said, we want to start to go into a little bit of a conversation with folks and understanding we stand on the backs of giants, but we also are standing and dealing with something that, a lot of folks feel like we hadn't seen before, or is it a very different new version of how we are dealing with the United States government, but also our different state governments and the attacks on our people. So I'm gonna open up, our panelist questions, and I'm about to, spotlight on everybody. But I'll start with this question: what are some of the biggest threats Black folks should be paying attention to right now in the South, either on the federal, state, or local level? And I'll pass it to Michael Elizabeth to kick us off.
You would just give me the hardest question out of all of them. No, thank you for this opportunity. And it's interesting that we asked this question right now because I don't know if folks know that like approximately 55 to 58% of Black Americans or Black people in this country live in the South, right? And so like the oppression, the discrimination, and anti-Black laws that we oftentimes have to fight on a federal and state level in the South is because They're scared of our presence and scared of our leadership. Right now, the threats aren't coming one at a time. They're coming as a coordinated strategy to reduce Black political power and control access to care. Um, we all know the gerrymandering fight that's happening right now that is trying to lock in power for lawmakers who don't represent Black Americans. For example, Texas is one of the perfect examples immediately where they've consolidated most of our congressional representatives into districts, blending Black voting populations into one district. So, for example, what used to be held by Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and Representative Al Green have been one district, right? And so two districts that oftentimes lift up Black leaders to not just be strong people empowered locally, but on a federal level are now consolidated into one, right? Um, when voting power is weakened, our ability to protect schools, hospitals, and civil rights is also weakened. In the South, we're also experiencing attack on healthcare and bodily autonomy. And when I say bodily autonomy, I'm also including attacks on gender affirming care, right? And reproductive health care. Because those attacks are about controlling who deserves care, right? So it's less about folks' values on, the words that we oftentimes hear as lifestyle choices. It's really about who they think are worthy of being alive. It's no secret that we need to be hyper concerned about the Medicaid restrictions and insurance barriers that disproportionately hurt Black settlers, especially those of us living with HIV. We all know about the Medicaid work requirements that are being implemented throughout the country. It's up to the states to decide how they're implementing them, right? And oftentimes, southern states tend to have the harshest, most racist, quite frankly, approach towards implementing policy. We all should know that HIV criminalization in the South, southern states tend to have the harshest criminalization laws. But what we don't oftentimes know is the trend that a lot of states are attempting to enhance HIV laws to include STIs as well, which we know would not only disproportionately impact people living with HIV, but all Black people in the South as another vehicle to criminalize us. What I did want to do a little attention to was in the South, where Black immigrants communities are growing, immigration enforcement now intersects with healthcare fear and avoidance. Oftentimes, when we look at immigration issues, we don't necessarily honor the layers of how many Black migrants are also impacted by these harsh immigration policies and implementation. Ultimately, the through line is who has the power, who gets to vote, who gets to have access to care, and who gets to live safely in our bodies. And so I think I'll highlight a couple of, top line items that I think should be a huge priority for Black communities and Black organizers in the South. You know, uh, what we're also seeing are like state governments attacking municipal governments, particularly cities where there are large Black, communities like Houston, like Dallas, just for example, or New Orleans as another example, or not to talk about your city, Mindy. So I'm gonna shut up now. Okay, yeah. So I hope that answers some of your questions. I know other people might have thoughts as well.
Thank you so very much, Michael Elizabeth. I do want to open it up the floor to our other panelists, especially living in two states that have some of the most conservative state legislatures. If there's other things that y'all want to highlight for us to be worried about, on top of the worries around gerrymandering, criminalization, healthcare, and the attacks on Black immigrants. I'm gonna move ahead and go.
Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, we both came
No,
off
go
mute at
ahead.
the same
Yeah, go
time.
ahead. I know, I know.
I just had to get my thoughts together. It's just one thing I want to say. The trend that I'm seeing and the apathy that I'm starting to feel from community, like people are burned out and tired. Everything we saw that were executive orders last year were filed as bills this year. That's what I'm seeing in Florida. And that's like the cadence that folks are following. And it's even happening, as Mike Elizabeth said, down to, I can never say that word, municipal level. And I don't think folks are paying enough attention, and that's intentional. I think folks are super stressed and worried and scared, and are waiting for the thing that comes to their front door for them to react, and that by then it's too late. And I just wanted to say that as like a way of saying there's a lot of people on here. I see you, I feel that, and I'm really grateful for this space and this discussion so that we can lay it out and really try to strategize as we'll close out the call, as Max said, with some tours and stuff that we're doing. But those are the things I'm also seeing. And like for me, Florida, the list is just too damn long. Like I can literally only focus on 3 things at a time, um, if that. So I just wanted to add that, but I'll pass it to Mandisa.
Yes. The first thing that is coming to mind as far as to answer this question is a phrase that I know many of us have heard of, how budgets are moral documents. Oftentimes that's used talking about nonprofit budgets, and I want to offer that it's also true of federal, state, and local budgets in terms of like it's clear what their agenda is. Like everyone, it's funny because, somebody who's been in an abolitionist practice at this point more than half of my life, I welcomed summer 2020, right? When this moment where like, unfortunately, at the cost of the life of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, a conversation's now happening. And it was so funny how liberals were really dense around what defunding meant. Well, how does it work or how do you do it? Fast forward to 2025, baby, we saw what defunding means because all of the institutions that we actually fought to get access to and to make sure our people were seen and were able to benefit from have been defunded. But I think part of what has to be acknowledged is the ways in which law enforcement, it's actually been an increase in funding. So their moral agenda is super clear. More people vying for less resources while the state, aka the descendants of the slave catchers or the slave patrols, law enforcement is there to pick you up if you dissent in any way. And so that is happening, sure, yes, at the federal level, but it can't happen without the buy-in of state law enforcement, of local law enforcement. Like we see that, like I know Minnesota is getting a lot of attention, and that's happening, in Louisiana, it's happening in every state where like local bodies are also supporting this agenda. And so that's something that I think is important for us to engage with how health information, how health status is being used by DHS. Part of what we have to contend with is that that groundwork was laid 20 plus years ago with HIV. And when we were advocating against it, the general consensus was it's HIV. And now we see that that was just a framework for what's happening now. More people being criminalized, being targeted, health access, health records being used in this way to help target and, and find people. And so that's something like that we just have to contend with is the ways that our understanding of law enforcement has to be broad. It can't just include local or state. It has to include the cops. It has to include the sheriffs. It has to include ICE. It has to include Border Patrol. It has to be anyone whose purpose it is to enforce laws that are harmful, like, and to play the role of criminalization. And so I'll stop there, but I definitely want to talk more about a criminalization in this concept, in this context, not only like for what that means for the criminalization of health status, but as Black people, there are a myriad of ways that we are criminalized, and Blackness has always been the basis of criminalization. Again, I'll talk more about that later.
I'm going a little off script, but because you had just brought this piece up, man, Disa, I had to throw it in there. And I
Okay.
know some of these folks have not had an opportunity to be a part of the abolitionist series that y'all
Yes.
have at CHLP, so to have an understanding. And also in our one of our foundational documents, we talked about divestment from institutions that harm us. And we also talked about a right not to be criminalized for behavior based on health condition or economic survival, and a right not to be free from an unjust criminal justice system. Can you talk a little bit how abolition ties in together with this divesting from institutions that harm us while also fighting to invest in actually the things that we do need.
Absolutely. Abolition is a framework. I often call it a lens. I call it a strategy. How I think of it is, I made a certain age and now I'm into like I have to wear reading glasses. Abolition is it's a way of seeing how power is arranged. And, again, it is building off of the 19th century slavery abolitionists. And it is offering not just what needs to be dismantled, but it's also saying it's not just about prisons and incarceration and law enforcement, which is necessary part of the prison system, but it's also asking us to come to terms with how did we get somewhere where the answer is incarceration and the answer is criminalization. So it's not just about the institutions, but it's about abolishing a society that says this is how we respond to poverty. This is how we respond to conditions. And abolition is actually a possibility model of what addresses our safety instead. If I know that law enforcement, whether that be ICE, we see the data about ICE, we see the data about cops, we see the data about troopers, about sheriff, about they are often like the biggest forms of sexual violence in people's life. So me as a Black feminist, if I say I'm committed to addressing patriarchal violence, but I don't have an analysis of how state violence is perpetuated, what am I building instead? How am I then addressing ways of keeping Black women and girls, both trans and cis, safe? So the abolitionist in me is not just about fuck that. I'm also saying, and what needs to be here instead.
Mm.
And then how that looks in this context is you're constantly in a state of understanding what state violence is, what power is, how it's arranged, and whether or not a potential strategy has a potential to lead us closer to or further from that violence. That is the abolitionist strategy, and I'll stop talking, but like, for example, I've been very disappointed, I will say, at the conversations around qualified immunity happening in this moment.
Mm.
And I couldn't care less about qualified immunity. Number one, they don't give a damn. Number two, I'm actually not trying to figure out strategies or put my energy like around strategies of what to do after the harm has happened. After the state has killed somebody else, like another Black person, all those things. Like, let's address before the harm happens. Qualified immunity is useful after a situation has occurred.
You've been teaching us, man. DC, you teaching us for real. Thank you, and much love in the chat also with all of what you just said, and I encourage people to also register for the abolition series. Make sure that you'll also be able to hear some of that and learn more of like what that actually looks like to build and to create. The next in the follow that I have around this is I'm gonna switch it up and go back to Kamaria. Um, you talked about some of the stuff in Florida. Could you give like a high level overview of the threat that y'all are dealing with currently around the ADAP pieces? And also give some context to also that this is part of a larger set of conservative ideas and plans that have been pushed by the governor and state reps in your state. And also talk about some of the power that y'all have been able to do in pushing back and really advocates coming together right now.
Yes. So most people know Florida put out, actually a month ago today, put out a notice. Well, the notice didn't come out. Sorry. I don't worry about the timeline. A month ago today, we found out that there will be changes to ADAP. more people kept talking, and then we started learning right before open enrollment dates closed that the formulary essentially was going to drop the FPL from 400% to 130% and potentially remove Biktarvy and Dovato, I believe, or Descovy. I get those two mixed up, sorry. Primarily Biktarvy off of the ADAP formulary, which would impact roughly 16,000 people. ADAP approximately serves 32,000 people. So actions were taken in various ways. Folks started physically going to the Capitol to talk to legislators. There were folks meeting with HRSA representatives. There were folks mobilizing CBOs and ASOs to start helping their clients access the best plan they could under the health marketplace. So this fire got lit under people, under their feet. And again, I can't keep up with the timeline because things have been happening really fast and are still happening. But due to the awareness that was raised and due to people sounding the alarm, I have to say on record, specifically a Black woman that raised the alarm at my care council meeting, that let people know about the ADAP changes. That led to advocacy with legislators becoming more informed, us getting at least 5 or 6 to do press conferences and go to the media. Folks started coming out from places that they didn't know they could speak about their bodily autonomy and what being taken off of ADAP would mean, and started telling their stories and showing the humanity that was at risk because of this decision or lack of decision and lack of transparency. And a lot of this was also done by skipping the rules making process. This is not a world that I live in often, so I don't fully know it, but I just know it's a process that was skipped. And we were just sent, we as in the state of Florida were sent various different letters communicating that folks were going to be taken off of ADAP and that their premiums weren't going to be covered. So folks start panicking. In addition to the advocacy and the media attention, there was then a lawsuit filed. Because of the pressure from that and the lawsuit, as of, I think this week, I think it was yesterday, I don't know, I haven't slept, the changes are being halted. And folks are, in some spaces, taking a breath of like relief that this isn't necessarily something that's going to be marching out March 1st, technically. But we don't know that. So as of, I think, February 18th, there'll be a hearing, and then we'll know what the process will be. We'll know whether or not they're going to keep the ADAP formulary as they have written it, or if they're going to actually listen to the people and change it, which is what they should have done from jump in January. So that is where we are right now. Me, Kamaria, honestly, am freaking out and really, really concerned. And the things I'm concerned about, I am not directly impacted, but I don't like being a person that's like, oh, I'm not directly impacted. It's not my problem. It is my problem because I worry about people. Anybody who knows me knows I'm tenderhearted. It is an issue of, I'm hearing from people who, because they're on their HIV treatment, they used to be on drugs, like harmful drugs. And because they got undetectable, they went into recovery. I have had people call me and say, Kamari, I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't get my meds. I'm going to start using again. That freaks me out. There are folks who are unhoused that are going to, I'm sorry, oh shit, that are going to give up if
Please
they can't
don't
get their
apologize.
treatment. I'm apologizing because I'm trying to talk and I can't talk when I cry. So I'm just trying to get it out. There's a threat of criminalization. If folks aren't on their treatment, they can't stay virally suppressed, and they're going to be at risk of criminalization. This includes breast and chest feeding folks. This includes folks who use syringe needles. It includes a lot of people. The implications is what we're not talking about. I sat in a meeting today where everybody in the room was talking about the implications, but nobody like wants to go on record and talk about this and put it out in writing. I have been working on a We the Floridians document. I keep getting told by various people to not do it because we don't know what's going to happen. Fuck that, I'm writing it. Well, it's already written, I just haven't shared it. So I'm going to share it. And I want people to add more to it. And I just realized I dropped an F-bomb, but y'all will be okay.
Yes, you will. Keep it going, huh?
But I think the people who are being impacted the most need to be the loudest. We need to be speaking up the most and not waiting for anybody to come save us. There are folks making decisions behind closed doors that may think they have the best intentions at heart, but they're not talking to the people who are going to be impacted. And at the end of the day, the state does not have the money, the resources, the capacity to support any changes being made in this capacity. There are people who worked at the state worked at the state. There are so many vacancies for our HIV bureau. I don't even know if it exists anymore, to be perfectly honest. All the people I knew that were there are no longer there. So the implications go way deeper than what you're seeing on news articles. Like, people in Florida don't even know who to go to talk to get answers to their questions. So we're having to talk to one another, which I think is a beautiful thing. It sucks that it's happening at this juncture. But one thing about Floridians is that we haven't been talking to one another. We've been talking at each other and bragging about what we're doing in the north, south, east, and west, but not actually working with one another to solve something. And we haven't done that in a really, really long time. And I think now is this weird, bittersweet, double-edged sword where we're forced to, because people are going to die. I literally have written my obituary not because I think I'm going to go anytime soon, but one, because I don't want my family cutting up when I do go, but also because I want to use that as a statement. I want to show, like, you see me now, but you might not see me tomorrow because of this decision. I encourage others to do it. It might be morbid, but it's also healing. I want to have the narrative over how my life goes from the time I open them into the time that they close for the last time. And I'm not going to let the state dictate that. I forgot your other questions, Matt, but that's the high level part of where we are with the Florida ADAP, amongst all the other attacks, from the don't say gay at work, from the book ban, from not being able to vote if you got married and changed your last name, from district lines changing, like all of the other threats that we're also up against. All of this shit is intentional. It's meant to keep us confused and distraught. Even the process of how we found out about the ADAP, I believe, and I will say that it's just a theory of mine, I believe if we hadn't got a heads up, we wouldn't have known about this until January 16th. I think it was intentional that we weren't supposed to know about it until after the open enrollment date closed, so that nobody could access support, so more people will be out. And I could be wrong, and I want to be wrong. Please tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kamaria, for your honesty, for your realness, for the F bombs, for all of that. It's important for us, and also important to have that. I also want to uplift some of the pieces that Vanita also put in, to make sure to look out where your local state is doing on ADAP. As Mandisa said, your budgets are moral documents, and morally, the state of Florida is saying that they do not want these people to have the resources that they deserve. We are seeing that in many states right now, and I wanted to ask collectively of folks, why do you believe that the folks in power want to are putting so much effort into erasing so much of the progress that we've done on so many of the different levels that y'all have talked about? Uh, and why are they able to move so quickly?
I'm just gonna be frank. This is Valerie Pinkston. Hey everybody.
Hey, Valerie.
I'm gonna be honest the way I feel. I got two words for you. Your president.
But
That's
I also,
basically
and thank
I
you
would
for
like,
that. Go ahead, Michael Elizabeth. But I was wanting to say, added to that is like many of our states have been doing this even before our presidents.
yeah,
yeah,
I would,
yeah, I do
I would-
know that, but he has given them a little bit more power about themselves. You understand what I'm saying? Like they
well,
didn't
I would love to clarify because he's just copying what's been happening in the South for the last 30 years. The South has always been the testing ground of anti-Black and anti-LGBTQ legislation. The national groups often pilot extreme bills in southern states first because in the South, we know they got the supermajority legislatures that makes passing these very toxic bills easier. They also, in the South, we have fewer procedural guardrails. Like, for example, in Louisiana, I don't want to speak on Louisiana all the time, I'm sorry. And in Texas, they can oftentimes suspend their legislative rules at will if they have the majority votes to, quite frankly, pass anything they want, regardless of timeline. If you remember, Texas will go into special session after special session after special session if the governor does not get the bills that he wants to get passed. Once a bill passes in one southern state, it becomes a template for the rest of the country, as I said earlier. The opposition uses overwhelming bill volume, like the number of bills that they file, as a deliberate tactic to exhaust us and advocates and normalize hostility. I'm gonna give you an example. So already it's barely the first week of February of the new year. We're already seeing 384 anti-LGBTQ plus bills filed and are moving at a faster rate than I've ever seen before on a state level. Last year, there was a total of 1,020 anti-trans bills. I didn't even say anti-LGBTQ bills. I said 1,020 anti-trans bills in 2025 across all 49 states. And each of those bills, over 90% were identical language from when the bill was initially filed in a southern state. You want me to repeat that again? Over 90% of the anti-trans bills were identical with each other from the original bill that was filed in a southern state. Baby, they copy and paste better than Macintosh. The bills are often straight from Alliance Defending Freedom and similar national organizations, same wording, same legal definition, same talking points. Southern lawmakers are often the first adopters, not the authors. They're not leading, they're following. And the South isn't behind. It's where the national groups go first to see what they can get away with. I'm happy to elaborate more, but I have a suspicion that.
No, I'm mind blown. Um, I'm thinking back to Max's question about why. And the answer like that I always have. And respectfully, I don't agree it's because of Trump. I actually think it's more incessant than that. White supremacy, this nature of violence, has always been the foundation of this country. And so what we are seeing is the logical conclusion of 200 plus years. Like, you don't build a country on human trafficking, which, let's be clear, the transatlantic slave trade, human trafficking. The Trail of Tears, human trafficking. The mass displacement of millions and the genocide of millions is trafficking. We can put another name, it is trafficking. You don't build an empire on that, then never address it and take responsibility from that legacy, and then think that these problems pop up. He is a symptom of what has always been there. So, not to be, negative, but that is why this is happening. The violence has always been the point. Like, I love my people. I love our HIV advocates. And I'm not always sure it's helpful to say people will die. They fucking know that. That's the point. They want to kill us. So I'm not saying don't say it, but I think it's just worth knowing that they know this. And so we have to acknowledge two things. One, that we are also unlearning these legacies of white supremacy.
Mhm.
And that B, we can't unlearn it while also appealing under that same paradigm. And I'm giving an example. Everywhere you turn, you hear folks make references of an empire across the water, right? You hear Nazi and you hear the Gestapo. And what bothers me about that is the Nazis got all that shit from the US. And you don't have to believe me. You can go read the Nuremberg trials. Be prepared, it's intense. They say they studied Jim Crow. They studied chattel enslavement. They studied the Trail of Tears. And they said, oh, we could do that shit. And in fact, they said the Americans took that shit too far. We can't even implement some of these things in Germany. The Americans did way too much. So no, what's happening in Minnesota, Keith Porter Jr. in Los Angeles, all these folks, that's not Gestapo, that's the slave patrol. And it would serve us, as Max said, to know our history and remember where the Nazis got that shit from. The cops that we know were the slave patrols. After Civil War, what did they become? The mindset didn't change. When the 20th century came and blacks fought to be in law enforcement and brown folks fought to be in law enforcement, that didn't change the paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
They're still slave catchers. Their goal is to kill in the name of the state and to preserve private property. That is still the goal. And so I say that to say, like, that is the why.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being willing to be in the discomfort that we are in a legacy of white supremacy, what do? We continue to avoid the conversation. We continue to center white comfort over truth. And then we wonder why it's not addressed. We are refusing to have the conversations that are so clearly, and I'll end with what Malcolm X said. The chickens are literally coming home to roost, like literally coming home to roost. We built, like the Bible says, like reap what you sow. We have sown seeds of white supremacy, and then we're shocked when the garden is violence. There is
Thank you.
no other white supremacy that is not, in fact, violence. Like when folks are like, I've never seen XYZ. Tell me you've never talked to a Black Southerner.
Ooh.
They used to eat us. Kidnapping children did that. Ask any indigenous person. You know what I mean? Kidnapping children, sexual violence. What we're saying but not saying is, I never thought that I always thought that my whiteness would exclude me from that. What's really being said is, I'm getting treated like Black people have been being treated.
And that's a scary thing for him out there. No, one, thank you, Mandisa, for really breaking down that why. And also Michael Elizabeth breaking down like why they're able to push those so quickly. Uh, the next question, and we'll have two more questions to like follow this up. This was titled A Reckoning. And speak, man, Decent talked about the Bible. Many times we talk about a reckoning, it is in many ways accountability. It is being held accountable to the actions that you had done on earth before you go up above. And what does a reckoning look like for the many states of the South, the many communities that we live in? What does a reckoning look like when it comes down to Black people's health? And what would that look like? What do you think that would look like, not just for you, but for our community of Black people here in the South?
I'll give one example that just popped in my head. I'm sorry, Mike Elizabeth. Go ahead, love. Okay. And I just forgot it. Oh, a reckoning for me would look like, I mean, the first thought that came to my head was leave us alone and let us build. Like there's so many examples in history of us building our own towns, our own infrastructures, our own communities. And what they do, they burned it, buried it, put a lake over it, erased us. A reckoning for me would look like just let us be. And I know it's more than that, but that's just the first thing that comes to mind, because we have the capacity and power to do it. And we don't have to keep being caught off guard and being attacked the way we have been. But I feel like that's a little bit of my chronic optimism kicking in, because there's more strategy that needs to go into that. So I'm gonna pass over to Michael Elizabeth.
I can keep this actually quick. I was about to say it's about owning our political and policy power, which includes advocacy power. I think we do a beautiful job of mobilizing our people, educating our people, and pushing us into action. But we only have one Black person living with HIV openly in the Texas legislature, and that's Benton Jones, right? Representative Benton Jones. And that's an example of somebody really owning and not just their political power, but their policy power. And we've already seen huge successes from that, right? Because of Representative Benton Jones, we're able to get appropriations for long-acting injectables covered by Wine White. All of that sounds like it might change soon with the funding shortfalls. And with more of us owning political power and owning policy power, we can literally eradicate HIV criminalization in the South. We've seen evidence of that in Maryland. They're making another attempt this year in Louisiana, and they need all the support that they can get, folks, if you have connections to resources, et cetera. And so because ultimately Black health disparities are not accidents, right? They are policy outcomes. And policies can change them ultimately. And that's what I think a reckoning means for Black people in the South.
I love this question. Um, I think, I'm channeling song, Southerners on New Ground and their groundbreaking campaign, Free from Fear. I think that is a part of a reckoning, is Black Southern people being very, very clear in our power and not having to look to someone else like for what is inherently a part. And what I would say as a generations long Black Southerner is literally our birthright. So I would start there as like as a necessary part of a reckoning, is like is standing clear in what I know I'm here to do. I would also say that reparations, you know, I don't know if y'all be knowing, but I'm a nationalist. I don't know if y'all be knowing that about me, but um reparations is never not a part of a conversation for me. And not to get all lectury, I think it's funny like when folks are like, "Oh yeah, like this white person bought me drinks." Hashtag reparations. Oh, that person should buy you drinks, and that's also not reparations. It's actually a systemic repair. It is actually not individual. It is actually the entire, like all the institutions, the system like that made all this possible have a holistic like approach in repairing. And something like that I think about is what does healthcare, health access, wellness, like what like is it possible to think of reparations for Black people living with HIV? What would that look like, right? Like I'm thinking as somebody not living with HIV, so just want to put that out there. Um, I'm thinking of what would it look like to have complete autonomy in your health access, not just as HIV is a part of it, but over your whole body. I don't just mean choice of providers to go to, but I mean meds are defined broad, right? In terms of, yeah, like prescriptions, but also how is having clean water, thinking of environmental racism as a part of a healthcare response to reparations. So like that is a part of the reckoning. And I also think having clarity on what is. Unfortunately, like we currently live in a world where it's actually more offensive to be called racist than to actually do the racist thing, right? Like how many times have I been in space where like something horrible happens and then you say, and it's often me, that was racist, and then the problem is not the act. It's that now it's been called and people are being forced to account. So a reckoning is when we can forthrightly and boldly say what it is, right? So like push back on this idea that uh and I know I've given this example before, but I love the support that ancestor Alex Preddy has received. And it's not lost on me that Breonna Taylor was an EMT who was in her damn house sleeping with her boyfriend and was killed. But I don't remember many of these institutions, these medical institutions, putting out statements when she was murdered in 2020. A reckoning is acknowledging why is that? You know what I mean? Like a reckoning is acknowledging that it's shocking because it was him. And again, not to take away, but it's been happening to us. So reckoning is having the conversation about why is it shocking now?
Thank you.
What's the shock? Is
100.
that you believed that certain people were never going to get the brunt of state violence. So yeah. But yeah, side note, I really want to think more about what does HIV in particular, but public health reparations look like? I
Thank
want
you
to
so very
marinate there.
much. No, thank y'all for all of that. That was very important. Now, I understand this is scheduled to go for 15 more minutes. I hope everyone is able to stay with us as long as Michael Elizabeth, it was when you registered. I just, but scheduled to go for 15 more minutes. We have one more question. I'm gonna combine two questions, be able to go, and then I also want to finish us off actually talking about the tour and what to expect from that space and how folks can also get involved. Um, so the combining of this question for folks is one, is there a lesson uh this is Black History Month, uh in understanding that history and understanding what we are going up against, what lessons, and some of you have already said this, but what lessons can we take from Black history to address the autocratic and fascist regime we're dealing with today? And if you could also uplift a initiative or group, and it could be one that you're working on yourself, that advocates that are working on to fight back for black political power and black liberation. I know I ended with such an easy question.
Actually, Max, I would say like that you started off talking about Lowndes County. And I love how sharecroppers in Alabama, Mississippi started a political party. They were able to assess that the current political party was inadequate to address their needs as Black, rural, mostly Southerners. And they said, oh, okay, I could spend this time groveling and forcing you to acknowledge my humanity, or I could make my own political party that actually centers exactly what it is that I need and that is important to me and my people in our freedom struggle. And the power of that, like just like Lowndes County, like and the power of what happened, and how it was a threat um to the national Democratic Party and how it made them have to reckon with some things. I think it's such a powerful example of that. You know what I mean? I also think of, like prior to the Black Panthers, which came out of Oakland, like you had the Deacons for Defense in Bogalusa, Louisiana. Exactly what it sounds like. Black men who were very clear of the racial terrorism in their neighborhood. And they said, oh, okay, we're going to get guns and we're going to go on our porch. And within weeks, Klan violence dropped to zero. Why is that? Deacons for Defense. It was very short lived, and the impact is great. Like the Panthers would talk about how that was a possibility model, for them. Small town Louisiana. It wasn't New Orleans, wasn't Baton Rouge, it was Bogalusa, Louisiana. I think like that's important to mention. It wasn't like it wasn't even a city. You know what I mean? So I think of how our people were able to assess that the state was unable to ensure their safety and their political rights. And so they built the things that was needed in order to ensure their safety and to ensure their political enfranchisement. Those are the models that we have in this moment. It's clear that the state is unwilling and unable to address our needs economically, politically, hell, spiritually, emotionally. You know what I mean? Like any need we have, the state is not adequate. So while I always think it's important to have a small number of us who are fighting to hold that state accountable, I also think it's important to have an even larger number of us who are building the things that we need instead. And we just have so many models like that, to look of everyday Black people who did that, Southerners at that.
Thank you. So and that warmed my heart bringing up those two. Those are real good ones, man. Decent. Thank you so very much, and definitely bringing over the families. Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power is a good documentary to learn more about that. And Bloody Lowndes is a good book. I'm gonna pass it to Michael Elizabeth, partly because I know that they need to also. It's like, come on.
Mari, can you take it for me? You know why in a second.
Are you passing it to me? Oh my gosh. Okay. Um, so what I wrote down while I was thinking and learning, thank you so much, Mandisa. So the first thing that popped in my head was like anybody who's gonna fight and not fold, that's who gives me hope. Um, and that fight can look different from everyone. I really need people to understand that everybody has a role. You don't have to do the thing that you see everyone else doing. You don't have to do what you see media telling you to do. Find your people, find your thing you're good at, and do that. Um, and then take breaks when you need to, but come back. So that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then, like locally, I have to shout out my Central Florida folks in Tampa and Orlando. So Most Loud is a group that's a part of AHF in some way, but I can call them for anything at the last minute and they will show up. I try not to do that because that's an act of violence, but they love me and they will show up and throw down anyway. Contigo Fund folks who understand that our struggles are not individual and that they're intertwined and they're intersectional and can put their BS aside and throw down with you even if they're not directly impacted. That's who gives me hope. This space absolutely gives me hope. Having conversations like this uh, filled me back up because I was very much going to start punching holes in my wall. And I can do that because I pay mortgage, but then I have to fix it and I don't have the money. So I'm grateful that y'all saved me from punching holes in my wall. Um, those are the people that give me hope. And of course, I have to shout out Sarah's work um, that we're putting out at another publication of Turn It Up magazine, making sure that the folks who are on inside know that they're not forgotten and they're not just data points and statistics that we're strategizing around, but they're actual people that we care about. So I'm really, really proud of that work we're doing with Juan Michael Porter and Carrie Thomas and our comms director, Eric. That gives me hope because I know we're reaching folks that everybody's not thinking about. So to you, Mike Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. I have to email a wonderful organization I would advise anybody who's of lived experience to join if you're not already a member, but the U.S. People Living with HIV Caucus, we're also having a steering committee meeting right now that I might have, accidentally double booked ourselves for, and they need to be emailed the agenda for that. So thank you for your patience as I was taking care of double hats. But I will say what also gives me hope is our Black people, of course. The Black people you see, well, at least on my whatever you call this monitor, Kamara is above me and Mandisa is like I'm in the middle, which if you're verse, the middle is very comfortable. Okay, I'm sorry. Back to what I was saying. Black people really do inspire me, but specifically Black trans people. These fights that we're experiencing now. I know I said earlier that they're nothing new for those of us in the South. They're absolutely nothing new for those of us who are part of the Black trans and gender expansive experience. And so therefore, some of the people in my life, I'm thinking of Save Our Sisters United in Texas, for example. There's a Black-led trans organization doing exactly what Mandisa and Kamari were just talking about, of like how can we take care of each other on a community level when the systems and governments fail us. I also would just say that there's so many opportunities to get more involved in states, in the southern states. In Texas, we got the Texas Strike Force. In Georgia, you got the Georgia HIV/AIDS Coalition. In Maryland, you got the HIV Decriminalization Coalition. So there are state-based coalitions that are in desperate need of new energy, new ideas, and new layers of lived experiences that, quite frankly, they've been getting more involved in. In fact, I need to find a study, so don't quote me yet. But there was a study done that actually said that states with HIV advocacy coalitions have higher access to the healthcare that they need for people living with HIV and better health outcomes actually for people living with HIV. And so literally what Vanita said in the chat earlier, even though I disagree, slightly, that like advocating will save our lives, literally that by itself. Now, I don't think we should depend on free labor at all. Free labor should be the option of last resort. That being said, sometimes it does mean you have to work for free, like I'm about to do in 15 minutes. So that's what I find inspiring. And some groups that you can plug into as well are like if you go to the Equality Federation website, you can view your state and you can click on the state partner that's applicable to your state. And they oftentimes are great partners when it comes to legislative sessions. And if you interact with any, unfortunate challenges working with a state partner, email me at mike@equalityfederation.org, and we can help triage that to what works best for Black people. So on that note, I think I'll pass it back to Max.
Thank you all so very much. This has been an absolute, like, just powerful, wonderful, an opportunity for me to even be around y'all three is always a pleasure. And to kick off this tour, to kick off this conversation that we're having that will go through April, this is an honor. We will have this recording available for folks so they can actually have an opportunity, as some folks want to use to teach others, because definitely I took some notes. I was going to school this entire time. This is an absolutely wonderful opportunity and panel discussion to also celebrate Black History Month, understand what we're also addressing right now, and also what we're trying to fight for our futures. With that, I also just dropped in there United We Rise, which I'm wearing the hoodie right now. Put together a calendar for a number of events, the National Black HIV/AIDS Awareness Days, events that are going on across this month that people can join. And I really applaud anyone to be a part of those, and shout out for United We Rise for putting that together. I also want to announce that we are starting this tour. This tour will actually kick off in Houston next week, and we will end it in Florida, where we will have Kamari to be able to talk and actually talk to Florida advocates. We will also be stopping in the month of February in the great state of South Carolina. We'll be going to Columbia. And in March, before AIDS Watch, we will be in Atlanta. Within those conversations, there'll be like an earlier conversation where also part of this shift that we were doing was a lot of also shift with talking to funders around how in which they also fund in the South and having long access to funding resources. We also have seen a big shift that is coming on. And with that, there will be dissemination coming from the Southern HIV Impact Fund in the first path of any of those days to talk about what they have learned from that impact of funding. The part of the day that I worry about that I'm going to be deeply engaged is the second half of the day, which is really talking about how we're addressing those shifts in funding, how we're also addressing, as we talked about, all the political attacks that our folks are having. How do we come together and build power in our communities? What do we need to actually make sure that our communities can continue to stay safe? What needs to be created in our communities to make that happen? What do we need to do and push back on? And also, what do we need to build up? I know many of you are part of different movement agencies, part of different organizations. What do we need to build up to also be more powerful in this time? To all the many networks that we talked about, how do we build them up to also be in a better space to deal with the attacks that were going on? And we also understand there's a very important election at the end of this year. And with that, as they continue to try to take that power away from us, we will continue to fight to make sure that our folks have that access and power, and also think about how we also move even past that election for even more Black political power in the South. And that is our goal, with not just the tour that we're having, and also to give that input that our community is giving and tell our funders this is what they need to be funding and this is what our community is asking for, but also to be able to continue to politically educate our folks to be ready for the attacks that are coming on, and also to build the future that we want to see. So those are a microcosm of what we're doing. I also understand that some of you don't live in those cities that we're going to. And some of you still want an opportunity to be a part of this. And shout out to Valerie, because Valerie's actually ahead of the game. Mississippi is already going to have a virtual space where they're going to be making sure that they get that input as well. And I know that y'all got an advocacy day at the end of March that I'm trying to get to. With that, we also invite others And you can email me directly, or you can email Vanita. If you would like to set up a virtual session where you're able to facilitate and talk about those conversations, we have a full facilitators guide where you're able to use that and have a facilitated conversation to talk about what does your community need, what are the attacks looking like, and be able to do that assessment of also what is needed to be built in your community to make some of those changes. And we want to make sure that as many folks are able to do this. And if you're not sure if you're going to be able to do it, you need to have more conversation. Feel free to reach out to me directly or Vanita so we can make sure that you have the access to those pieces and are able to give that input, because all of this input will be going to a set of large funders in the South, funders across the country that fund in the South, to make sure that they understand this is what our people are asking for. So if you're interested in that, if you want to be more engaged in that, please reach out to Benita or myself, and we'll make sure that you're able to be a part of that. And if you also are in any of the cities that we're in or close by, we want to make sure that you get to be a part of those as well. Um, Sorry that we weren't able to get to more questions from folks and to hear from the wonderful parts from y'all. If you are interested in learning more, we will have also more webinars coming down this year. This is just the start and the kickoff of the tour. There will be more pieces coming from us as Black South Rising, and we will continue to be letting folks know about what's going on. Follow us on social media as we continue to get all these things together. Again, thank every single one of you for having this space. I want to thank and have special shout outs to thanking Kamaria, Mandisa, and Michael Elizabeth for taking time out of their day to make this happen. So thank y'all so very much. And I can't believe, thank you so very much. And before we end Black History Month, make sure that y'all join HiNat. Gotta be there. So make sure y'all do that as well. Thank y'all so very much. Thank y'all for joining us. I'm gonna close this out shortly. But again, stay black. As many of y'all will be. Love y'all so very much. Thank y'all for this and continue to be blackly black this Black History Month. Thank y'all.
And thank you, Max. You like to go unthanked. And so we just want to say thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Max.
Moderator, who did that?
And Mama V
Thank
for holding
you,
down the
Kevin.
chat.
Yeah, I'm surprised
Yeah.
she didn't come off mute.
Maybe I'm surprised too.
I was waiting for it, me.
Me too. All right. I see
Y'all
half of y'all.
held it